Welcome back to the Tool Crib. Today we are going to be talking about the Leatherman Rebar. Now the Leatherman Rebar is going to be what I consider to be more of your traditional multi-tool. And what I mean by that is I feel like it takes a lot of its design cues and kind of harkens back to the early days of Leatherman, back to the PST or the Pocket Survival Tool, the tool that actually launched Leatherman back in 1983. In fact, I kind of feel like the Rebar is the PST for the 21st century, but this is a much more refined multi-tool than what those early versions of Leatherman multi-tools were. Now, much like the Wave is considered the little brother to the Surge, so too the Rebar is considered the little brother to the Super Tool 300. They're going to have almost identical tool sets, but obviously the Rebar is going to be a much smaller multi-tool because it's not in the heavy duty or 4.5-inch frame size. Now, we're going to go through the tool set, kind of show you what the Rebar has to offer, what its capabilities are. And then there are some distinct advantages that I think the Rebar has when comparing it to the other standard duty multi-tools within the Leatherman lineup. But I also feel that there are some disadvantages that the Rebar has when comparing it to those other multi-tools as well, and I'd like to discuss those. First and foremost, though, we're going to get into the specs for this tool, and then we'll move along to the tool set and then talk about those other things. Let's get started. So the Rebar is going to be in your standard duty multi-tool size, or a 4-inch frame size. And it's going to come in at 4 inches overall, or 101 millimeters. Now, if you measure the width of the Rebar in its closed position from outside to outside of the tool releases for the inner tools, it's going to measure in at 1 3/8 of an inch, or about 35 millimeters. And then its thickness is 9/16 of an inch, or about 14 millimeters. Now, the weight on the Rebar listed from Leatherman is at 6.7 ounces, but I have always measured the Rebar in a little lighter than that at 6.63 ounces, or 188 grams. I'm not sure what the discrepancy there is. It may be my scale, but my scale is usually pretty well accurate with those specs that Leatherman puts out, so I'm not sure what the issue is there. But at any rate, let's get into the tool set. The first implement we're going to be looking at is going to be the main blade. A couple of things first. 420 high carbon steel on both of the knife blades, no upgraded steels in the Rebar. All of the interior tools are locking, and all of the implements open from the inside, so no outside accessible blades or other implements on the Rebar. Now, even though all the tools are internal, you do not have to open up the Rebar all the way in order to get to your knife blades. They will go past the pliers because they're on the outbound side, so you do not have to fully open it in order to get those blades out. Now, on the main blade, Leatherman does something it's a bit misleading in my opinion. So what they do is they measure the knife blade out at 2.9 inches, and what they're doing is they're measuring from the tip of the blade to the center of the pivot point. Now, in my opinion, that's misleading. That's disingenuous, because where I measure the blade length is on the cut edge, and on the Rebar, that cut edge is 2 3/8 of an inch, or about 61 millimeters. And that's going to be true for the main blade as it is for the serrated blade. Next implement over is going to be our combination slotted driver, 1/4-inch slotted driver, as well as a mini pry tool. Now, Leatherman doesn't call this out as a pry tool, I don't believe, on the Rebar. On some multi-tools they do, and on others they don't. So this actually works as two functions: large screwdriver or mini pry tool. Next tool over is one that I really feel gives the Rebar an advantage over some of the other multi-tools in the Leatherman lineup that are going to be in standard duty sizes, and that is the awl. This is a very, very good awl. In fact, it's, in my opinion, it's the best awl on any of the standard duty sizes, and it's going to take its design cues from that of the Super Tool 300 or the Leatherman Surge, except it's going to be smaller, obviously, because it's in a standard duty instead of a heavy duty multi-tool. A very, very good awl with a nice sharp point and sewing eyelet. And then the next tool over is another flat driver. This is going to be our 1/8 inch driver. Pretty standard stuff. Not much more to say about that. And then next tool, or next feature over, I guess we would say, is our lanyard loop. If I can get that little guy to... So lanyard loop that comes included on the rebar. Now, the rebar doesn't have a pocket clip available for it, or the ability to add a pocket clip. So while I don't really use the lanyard loops to attach lanyards to, except on a couple of knives that I own, that is a very good feature in this particular multi-tool because it does not have the ability to put a pocket clip on it. And then the last tool on this side is going to be the file. Now the file on the rebar, unlike that of the Wave or Charge, is not going to have a diamond file. What I will say about this file though is that the cut pattern on it, much like the Super Tool 300, is very aggressive. So it is a very, very good file. It's going to be similar in functionality to that of Victorinox files, which also make a very good file. The cut pattern on the diamond file for the Wave and also for the Surge, the cross cut, is not nearly as aggressive as this one. So it has a single cut, then edge file, and then cross cut combination wood metal file. And then on the opposite handle, we'll get the serrated blade out first. Now the serrated blade, like I mentioned before, on the blade length is 2 3/8 of an inch, or 61 millimeters, and it comes with this more rounded front or sheep's foot design that you don't see on a lot of Leatherman multi-tools. They usually have more of an angular front to them, where this one has that nice swooping curve. Very, very sharp, very good blade as well. Next tool over is one that I really like a lot, and Leatherman puts this in a lot of their multi-tools, and this is the 3 combination tool, where it has a very excellent can opener, and then it has a decent bottle cap lifter. It's not the greatest, but it does function. And then the tool that I really get a lot of use out of is the wire stripping functionality. And so what I do is I actually collapse the tool, set the wire in between the frame of the multi-tool and the cutter, where I'm able to put some pressure on it, and then I can rotate the tool around the insulation on the wire to get a nice, straight, clean cut, and then easily pull off the insulation. Makes a great stripper. And then the next tool over is, a lot of people like a full dimensional or 3-dimensional Phillips driver on their multi-tool. And I can see where they're coming from, because here in North America, most especially in the USA, we have, this is probably one of the most common drivers that you can have. And while I actually prefer the bit exchanger with the proprietary bits, because I'm able to expand my driving capability on a multi-tool, I can definitely understand why a lot of people like the 3-dimensional bit as opposed to that driver. This is a very good screwdriver, and it gives you about 1.5 inches of length, so a decent amount of length to get into in case you have a recessed screw. It really works well. And then the last tool on this side is going to be the saw. Now the saw, much like most Leatherman saws, is going to be a very, very good saw. It has a very aggressive tooth pattern that cuts in both directions, and like most quality saws, it's going to be thicker on the cut edge than it is on the spine, so that your saw does not bind up whenever you're making your saw cuts. Very good saw. It's just a touch shorter than what you're going to find on that of the Wave. And then if we get it opened up and take a look at the pliers. Now the pliers is a feature that I really like a lot on the rebar. And you're going to find the same set of pliers in the Leatherman Signal. But I think this particular plier has an advantage over that of the Free P4, P2, and Wave Charge series. And the reason I like this particular set of pliers is because of its more industrial design. Because one of the functions that I use my Surge for and that I could get use out of this one is for using it as a reaming device on the inside of PVC, freshly cut PVC or conduit or EMT. And it makes a good reamer for that function because it has those more 90-degree angled edges or sharp edges, where those other multi-tools have a nice curved radius edge. I like this one a little bit better, and it's a little beefier than that of the Wave Charge series. Now the Free P4 is a little different, but they still have some issues with that plier head that they need to get the kinks worked out of. I actually like this plier head better than that of the P2, P4. It's going to come with a very nice needle nose point. I really like how that comes down to a very sharp point. Needle nose, regular pliers, and 154 cm cutters, replaceable cutters and hardwire cutters that we're seeing more and more in Leatherman multi-tools. In fact, I think they pretty much switched over everything to this style of cutter in their standard duty and heavy duty lines. And then on the back of the pliers, we have the wire crimper. Now the crimper works decent. It works better on the larger multi-tools than it does on the standard duty, but it does function. It's just a little tedious to use, but once you do get it start crimping, it does make a pretty nice crimp connection. That is the tool set for the Leatherman Rebar. Now let's talk about some of the advantages that the Rebar has over the other multi-tools. The first advantage that I think that the Rebar has over some of the other standard duty multi-tools within Leatherman is going to be the awl. And I think this has got to be probably the biggest advantage in my opinion. So here we have the Free P2, Free P4, Signal, and then finally the Rebar. Now the Signal has a decent awl on it. Comes down to a nice sharp point. Doesn't have the length that you're going to get out of the Rebar. And also because the pommel's in the way, using it in the closed position, you don't get a lot of depth out of it. It is a pretty good awl though. I think the Rebar is a bit better. Now, when it comes to the new Free series, where they add that little screwdriver tip on the front, I think that the Rebar awl is far, far, far superior to those. Now, while they do work and do a decent job, they're not nearly as strong as what you're going to find on the Rebar. If we take a look, you could kind of tell the thickness difference and how much more robust the awl is on the Rebar, and it comes down to that nice sharp point. So this is one of the biggest and the first advantage for the Rebar. Now the next advantage I think that the Rebar has is going back to those plier heads. The pliers on the Signal though are going to be identical. I like as I talked about before, I like that more squared off plier, and you can see that if you look at the edge here, you can see that the Rebar plier actually has a lot more behind it as far as metal, and just makes it a little bit stronger than that of the Wave, and in some ways a little stronger than that of the Free series as well. Now the Free series is a lot wider and is supposed to be a lot stronger than all of these others, but there's some issues with that new plier head that they've got to work the kinks out of before I'm going to say that I like this one better than either one of these. I think the pliers are a big advantage for the Rebar as well. The next advantage that I feel that the Rebar has over some of these other multi-tools is its compactness. It is a very compact, and it's a much lighter weight multi-tool. So where the Rebar comes in at 6.63, the Signal is going to be about an ounce heavier than that, and both the Wave Plus and the Free P2 are going to be pretty much a full 2 ounces heavier than that of the Rebar. Now, the next advantage that the Rebar is going to have over these other multi-tools, and we've left out the P2, but it's going to be the price. The Rebar comes in at $70 retail, where the Wave Plus is $100. The Free P2, which is not shown here, is $120. The Signal is also $120, and the Free P4 is $140. So when you're comparing it to the Free P4, it's actually half the price of the Free P4. It's 30% cheaper than that of the Wave Plus, and even more so than the Signal or the P2. So price has a is a big factor for a lot of different people. If you're looking more for a full set of tools in a multi-tool, but you don't want to break the bank to purchase a free P4, because I think that the rebar gives you 85% of the capability of the free P4, and in fact I think some of the tools within the rebar do a better job than that of the free P2 or free P4. And in the case of the wave, obviously you get the missing all. So price is definitely something that should be considered. Now we're going to segue into some of the disadvantages that the rebar has, and the one thing that should jump out is that the rebar does not have a pocket clip, nor does it have the ability to add a pocket clip as an accessory. I like the size and weight of the rebar, and if it had a pocket clip, because I think it's a great pocket carry multi-tool, but the fact that it's missing the pocket clip is a big disadvantage. Now while we still have all these out here, and the next disadvantage, and we'll get the signal turned around so we get a little better look at it, that the rebar has against these others is it has no outside accessible tools, especially outside accessible blades. And for some people that could be a determining factor. I actually prefer a wave style, surge style, and that's why I carry the surge, because I like the tool set, I like its robustness, but I also like the fact that it has outside accessible blades. That's a big factor for me, and the rebar does not have that. So that is another disadvantage for the rebar. The next disadvantage that the rebar has over the Wave Plus and the Free P4 is going to be its lack of scissors. Now, like for most people, the awl is one of those tools in a multi-tool that they cannot go without. For others, the scissors fits that bill, where if it doesn't have scissors, they won't even consider that multi-tool. So the lack of scissors is a disadvantage for the rebar. Now, that being said, I actually prefer multi-tools if they're not set up like a surge, and no other multi-tool is, where they allow you those 5 outer implements. Then I prefer to have the scissors missing. And the reason that I say that is because if I wanted to carry scissors within my EDC, there are many more options in knives and smaller keychain multi-tools that incorporate scissors as opposed to a saw or a file or a larger blade. So I actually prefer that it doesn't have scissors as opposed to missing an implement like the awl. But for some people that's going to be a big disadvantage, that it does not have scissors. Now this next issue could go either way for a lot of people, because as I mentioned before, there are a lot of people that like to have a 3-dimensional Phillips driver on their multi-tool that doesn't have to be in a bit kit, or is not something that you're going to lose, that it's implemented into the tool, where I tend to prefer the bit exchanger and then the ability to add on a bit kit and the extension. Now that being said, there is a solution for the rebar, and it's this kit, where you can actually add on an adapter, and you'll see that the adapter on there is squared off so that it fits directly over the number 2 Phillips, and then from there you are able to add on some extra bits. Now the only thing that it does not allow you to do is add on the extension, which I like to have the ability to add on the extension. So this could go either way, because there is advantages to having a 3D Phillips on your multi-tool as opposed to being in a bit exchanger such as this. And this is one of those items that's going to be, to each their own. Overall, I really like the rebar. I like its compactness, I like its weight range. The only thing that really is a disadvantage for me, a real disadvantage, and that's the fact that it doesn't have a pocket clip, because I feel like this size and weight range would make a perfect pocket clip carried EDC. I really like the rebar because it has a good tool set. I'm actually okay with it not having scissors, because I can get scissors in any number of smaller Victorinox knives and have very high quality scissors. That's something that I would be willing to give up, because it'd be easier to add it, or for that matter, in a any number of the Leatherman keychain tools as well would have that ability. So overall, I do like the rebar. It's actually built like a little tank, and I alluded to earlier in the video that this kind of takes this design cues from the PST. Well, those early versions of Leathermans, the one downside that they had is they had a lot of hot spots because they left a sharp edge of metal on the ends here, on the handles. And these are much more refined, so they have a bit more of a radius like the Super Tool 300 is going to have. So while they're not as comfortable as you're going to find in a Wave or Charge series, they're not super uncomfortable. And matter of fact, the rebar handles, when using the pliers, are actually more comfortable than that of the P2 and P4 because they have a couple of hot spots in those multi-tools that they need to iron that out. The first generation that's come out of those definitely has some points that will get your attention when you're using the pliers, where the rebar is not super comfortable, but it's not uncomfortable either. So overall, the rebar is a very good tool. Now, deciding what's right for you you're going to have to figure out what works for you. Some people, like myself, like the ability to have outside accessible blades. That's why I like the Wave, Charge, and Surge series of multi-tools. For others, it's going to be a lack of scissors, and still others, a good high quality awl, and this definitely fits the bill for the awl because it has the best awl of any of the standard duty multi-tools in the Leatherman lineup. I personally like the pliers a lot better on this one. I think overall this is a really good tool, and deciding whether or not it's right for you, you're going to have to factor in all of those things and then weigh that against price and see if this one is going to work for you. I give the rebar a positive grade. I think it's a strong B in my opinion. It's not an A tool, but it's definitely right up there, and the tool set within it is very, very good. My name's Ben, and you've been watching my review of the Leatherman Rebar. If you like this video, I would appreciate it if you hit that thumbs up button, and I'll see you in the next one.